So the reason I asked who all wasn't here for the first one, that's fine. Just to give you some background, we went through, I realized we actually went through part 1 of the Django tutorial. So this is part 2 of the Django tutorial of the part 2 Django tutorial of Python Frederick. So yeah, well, I think so, because I guess we just stopped at introducing Django admin. So it was a good stopping point. Let me kill Slack so it doesn't pop up and send notifications. Just a refresher, I am operations guy by trade, or by origination. I do a lot of Python development now. I do 0 web development. So the idea here is I'm going through the Django tutorial, you're going through the Django tutorial with me. There's going to be a lot of stupid questions that I ask, and if you have the answers for them, don't hesitate to say them. Because there's probably some of you, especially even the new web guy back there, might actually know some things that I have no clue. The biggest one that came up last time was what the dry principle is. It's don't repeat yourself. I had never even heard of that before. And then, of course, I coined, not Caleb, I coined the wet principle, which is write everything twice. So it's good. This is good stuff. So. Just to give some background, some more. We have a Django.
Can we blow that up a little bit?
Sure.
Folks in the back.
Thank you.
Give me a second. There we go. I'm not a Mac person except for at work, so I have to remember how to use things because I use Ubuntu at home and it's so much better. But because I'm in a cybersecurity company, everything has to be exactly the same across the entire network, and I can't even bring my own personal stuff. It's fine. I'm not that hurt about it. It's actually a really great company. So we have a Django site here. It's if you go through the first part, this is basically what you get here. We're building a polls application just to show what's kind of going on here in the background. We have the models. The models are actually interacting with the database, making it easier for us to interact with the database. We have these different models of question and choice. The thing we finished with was creating a function called wasPublicedRecently that returns the publication date if it's returns the publication date that's greater than or equal to time zone now minus date time delta days -1. I don't remember exactly why we did that, but that was part of the...
Like everything that was published a day ago.
That's right.
That logic says.
Yeah, okay. Right, because that's the function
less
is
than a
checking to see if it was published recently. In our particular case, we're looking for anything was published within the last day. Thank you. So for Django, we have this Django admin thing. So philosophy, generating admin sites for your staff or so I know from hearing about Django before, I think it's the Washington Post. Washington Post uses Django, and they actually present their admin page to their writers, I think. And so the writers actually use maybe the admin page to be able to add and delete content, which is pretty interesting. It looks like that's what this Django admin is going to do for us. So Django was written in a newsroom environment. I'm not full of crap. I knew I read that somewhere. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. This admin site allows you to have content publishers be able to write things and decide whether or not they want to publish it. So that's pretty good. We're going to create an admin user here. So first we'll need to create a user who can log into the admin site and run the following command. So we got to run our Python command manage py, create super user.
And if you weren't at round 1, manage.py is like the interface to
Yep.
all the Django subcommands.
Yeah, so actually a good thing here. We'll do Python. And just to give you some information there, we used pipenv to create this environment. I got into my pipenv shell by running pipenv shell, which gives us this virtual environment that already has all the things in it, all the virtual environment things. Let's go ahead and cat pip file. So yeah, all we have installed is Django. So
Patrick, you recording this?
Yes.
yes,
Wonderful.
yep.
Yeah.
And if I'm going too fast, too slow, tell me. This is totally interactive. I am your hands and loud mouth.
Yeah,
So
we have a Python Frederick YouTube playlist that we'll make sure to link to in any email that goes up after this.
Excellent.
So just a real quick look at Managed Pi. That's this application that comes when you install Django on your virtual environment. Has all these awesome commands, which we went over some of them last time. Some of them we're going to go over here in a second. In this particular case, we're going to run create super user, which is going to ask us to create a username. Let's call it admin because we don't care about security. Oh, it's already been taken. Really?
We already ran
Yeah,
that.
you made an account.
Oh, I did?
Yeah.
Why did I do that?
Got its password.
Oh,
You tell me your password and I'll check it.
Hunter 2.
That's it?
We'll call it admin 2.
You already created that.
And then we'll call this admin at google.com. And we'll just use the password of admin. It's going to say, hey, that's too common. Are you sure you want to do that? Yes. Great. We created a super user. Anybody remember what that was? See, I thought I already did that, but hey, whatever. It's admin 2. That's fine. So yeah, we did all this. We went through and created our desired username.
We might have jumped ahead a little bit to like make some data last time.
Did we?
I don't know.
Well, let's find out. I looked at the YouTube from last time, and it stopped at this time zone section here, which was above this. Anyways, so let's start the development server that's running Python managed Pi run server. Yeah, so we started using that. You don't need see this, how it says Linux/Mac? What's this Windows thing? Nobody wants that. There's also a really awesome meetup, the Linux user group here in Frederick. You should check it out.
There's also a .NET user group in case you're more of the Microsoft persuasion.
Great, so looks like we've started our development server here. Let's see if there's, I know we, through the Django shell, we created some
Right,
data.
that might have been-
I don't think we've actually logged into the admin side of it. Oh, you know what? If you read the instructions, it tells you to go to /admin, not /. There we go. So there's our Django admin page. That's pretty sweet. I like how that just comes in as default. Let's see, open web browser, go to /admin. Should see an admin login page. Since translation is turned on by default, the login screen may be displayed in your own language. This is, I think, English. I thought that was funny.
Even US English.
Let's go ahead and log in.
Probably is.
Great. Let's see. No, we don't want to save that. Django admin. Yep. Now try logging in with the super user account you created in the previous step. We do. You should see a few types of edible content. Editable, not edible.
Thank you.
I'm not. Can you tell I'm hungry? No, I'm just kidding. Users and groups, they are provided by the Django contrib auth, the authentication framework shipped by Django. Let's take a look at that. I just want to understand what the contrib auth is. User authentication in Django.
So if you recall from the previous session, there were installed apps.
That's
and
right.
There's a default set. We went through and used like a template that they give you for here's how you quickly generate a website. And when they put some in there for you to make some of these things easy to do because they're things that show up in a lot of websites.
Like?
So this Django contrib auth as an authentication is one of those things.
Having built-in password strength checking is pretty good. That's pretty good. I like that. That's pretty interesting because I guess the power that Django is if you use something like Flask or Bottle, you would have to build a Python strength checking, or you would probably pull in like a library that does it. This
Yeah,
comes in
there's
standard.
a rich extension ecosystem and the other things, but the Django philosophy is like, we're gonna just give you the things that people commonly need and just assume that if you don't want it, you can trim it out rather than having to go look for it proactively to put it in. It's just a different philosophy for how to building. Some people really hate that philosophy because it means that there's more code in there and they're concerned about surface area of like what can be exploited or whatever. But when you're trying to do stuff quickly, it's really, really handy.
Make the poll app modifiable by the admin. But where's our poll app? Yeah, because it doesn't, we only see questions. Is that interesting? Maybe we did this. You might be right. We might have just done all this.
Let's check in the admin itself, see what's there. I think we put in a couple of questions.
You're right. Oh, you're right. Does anybody remember the random for loop that I wrote? Because I just did. Yeah, okay. So, so we have a bunch of questions here because we use the random function to generate 101 questions. That was kind of funny. All right. So I take it back. Let's go on to part 3. Actually,
Good recap.
that makes sense because we would have started on part 3. I think that makes more sense.
So it looks like maybe you registered your questions, but not your
Choices?
Choices,
Right.
with admin. So if you registered choices, then you'd have a choices.
Yes,
Thing
yeah,
there.
the admin only will show, it doesn't show anything by default. You have to explicitly opt in your models because you may not want every model database table that you create in your site to show up in that admin list. There's also a ton of like controls to configure who can see what. That's a little bit more advanced and probably not covered in the scope of the tutorial.
All right, so starting over, writing our first Django app part 3 on part 2 of the Python Frederick Django tutorial. There we go. So overview, a view is a type of, a view is a type of web page. So we write these different views and they present themselves via Django. In Django, web pages and other content are delivered by views. Each view is represented. Every time I say represented, is that even right? That doesn't sound right. Represented? Why do I always want to say represented?
I don't know.
Because my brain's crazy. By a simple Python function or method in the case of a class-based view. Django will choose a view by examining the URL that's requested to be precise, the part of the URL after the domain name. That makes sense. All right, let's write a view. Writing more views. Now let's add a few more views to the polls view.py. These views are slightly different because they take an argument. Okay, so polls views.py. Yeah, so we only have the one view here. It looks like we're going to add some more. Let's see here. Views are slightly different because they take arguments. So we have a function of detail, results, and vote. What we have currently is just index. All right, so we'll copy this. All right, so the function of detail takes in the request and the question ID, returns HTTP response, which we annotated up there. You're looking at question, the question ID. Result is also taking in question ID. And response is slightly different in the sense of it's creating a response of you're looking at result of questions. Kind of the same thing as up here, just presented slightly different. Yeah.
Into a variable.
Yeah.
Is the request like an object, kind of,
Yes.
from the HTTP?
Yep.
The request?
They bundle all that data up. It includes like all of the HTTP headers, any data, like if you're doing a form post, it'll include the post data. You can access all that information. But the request is like the interface coming in And then the thing that you send going out is the response,
Okay.
which is why I have HTTP
Yours
response.
updated as an object.
Yes, yep. Mhm.
And then lastly, a function of vote, taking in a question ID and responding with a you're voting on question ID. All right, that makes sense. Oh, come on. There we go. Perfect. All right, so wire these new views into the polls URL module by adding the following path calls. Okay. So we want to update polls URLs. We only have these here. We need to add in a couple other. Let's just go ahead, make this a little easier on ourselves by copying this.
Can the Django return the response in form of a stream rather than, like for instance, if I wanted to use it to make a file server or something, or just a download link, the file itself is much too large to send back in a single response. I want to be able to stream it off of this. Can you do that?
I want to say yes. I believe that's like an HTTP 1.1 feature, the streaming stuff. You know, can't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure the answer is yes.
All right, so we've got these URL patterns that we're adding in. Looks like we already have this one here. So we can go ahead and delete this and just take in all the new ones. So that's going to add in the path that we had, plus allow us to start accepting paths of /polls, like an example here of polls/5, which would probably return question number 5. And then also now we'll also have, and it looks like it's going to be calling these other, I bet it'll go into it in the next couple of sentences, where we pass in the question number and then also /results. It'll go to our new results function and then also a vote function here. That makes sense. Let's go ahead and save that. Yeah, so, okay. Take a look in your browser at polls/34. It'll run the detail method and display whatever ID you provide in the URL. Try polls/34/results and polls/34/vote2. These will display the placeholder results and voting pages. So let's go ahead.
I think run server is off.
You're right. What's that?
I think you can run it in the tab, and when you update your code, it'll automatically refresh.
Yeah,
the server.
I was gonna do that next time around. I just killed it because I'm crazy. Polls34/results. You are looking at results of question 34. Hey, that's right. Let's do vote, and you're voting on question 34. So that's pretty good. That's taking our new views there and making them pretty easy to display. And we could probably look at the, yeah, so it sees us getting polls/34/results and vote there. And it's obviously getting the correct new things that the new views that we entered.
Before you go on, the last time I did this, the thing that always confused me was how the parameter gets from the URL to the URL.py. How does that 34 get pulled out and stuffed into the question ID in the function that you defined earlier in views?
So what I believe, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, that's where we get looking into the,
Sorry if that was covered last week.
no. That's where we get into, so the way that I think it works is the request gets passed automatically off to the polls cat URLs Like, the first thing it'll look at is this URL section here, and that's doing all the routing based off of that. We could, in our view, if we wanted, we could print out the request as part of the log, and you could actually see all of the things that are coming in that request. It's a whole slew of probably gobbledygook, except for the part that you're looking
What I'm
for.
getting at is it because, by virtue of the fact that the path had an info and question ID?
Well, it's,
Yeah,
Right.
so-
And somehow that gets stuffed into question ID, the parameter of the views function.
Yeah, if you were pre-Django 2.0, that path thing used to be called URL. And what you used to pass to it, instead of a string, was a regular expression pattern
Okay.
that had a grouping, say like, anything you find that matches this pattern, apply it to this name. And then that name then gets passed to your view function.
Okay.
In Django 2, because regular expressions are gnarly for, experienced developers, like, so what they decided was, let's model this after what, like, Flask has done and a bunch of other frameworks, and kind of give this simplified pattern language that says, using the angle brackets, say, I expect an integer here, and I want to give it this name. So this int : question ID, that's what gets passed into your view function. You can still go back, and the URL thing is not gone, so if you have like complicated regular expressions that you need to do in your URL matching, you can lean on that. But this sort of vastly simplifies the 99% use case for people. So that's what's going on there. The pattern matching is saying like, okay, I found an integer, it's got this label of question ID, so I know that when I call detail, I'm going to pass question ID as a keyword argument. And since if you go back to the views file and look at the detailed view, you'll see it has two parameters. It has request and question ID that get kind of injected into the view.
Hey, Patrick, did you go back there for a second? It looks like polls is actually never added to the path. It looks like that path would work with anything.
It would. And so actually I wanted to point that out. Thank you for highlighting it. It's like, this is only working this way because if you go to, there's a root URLs comp file, a configuration file, that mapped polls to that poll application.
All right.
So if you wanted to call it my polls or voting polls or whatever, you could change that name very easily.
So these are paths off of the root.
Right, so it's kind of a relative,
Right, yeah.
gives you the flexibility to put it here, there, wherever you want, whatever label you want. I don't know, maybe they pointed out somewhere in the pros of the tutorial, but, or did it earlier when they kind of wired it together, but.
So if you added another path there and mapped it to, so.
Yeah, you
You
could
could have
either,
another
you could
one
either
that's
change this polls here, or you could,
Polls to, and map it to exactly the same.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Does that make sense, Bob?
Yeah, I was thinking back, I was on some earlier version of Python, so it probably was still I was using a regular expression. And I was just trying to think back to that time when I did this. It wasn't clear what was, a parameter that got matched that was just an opinion Django had versus what was a hard linkage between this string or this set of characters means this variable name.
Yeah.
When I'm going through navigating through the different, because what had happened was I decided to add another root with a different variable, and I could never make that connection work properly. So it was all fine as long as I used question ID, but as soon as I wanted to do like member ID or something like that, mine overlap, it fell apart. Anyway, thanks.
Sure.
You
It's
can-
pretty common, it's starting to be a very common pattern in a whole bunch of these web frameworks.
Yeah, it was like a common pattern, but it wasn't exact anything I'd seen, so I wasn't quite sure what I was looking at when I was trying to, where should I put my new variable member ID?
Yeah.
I think this paragraph here kind of talks about what you were saying there with the root URL conf, taking the first section of that there and then passing off the rest of it to the to the actual polls app.
Cool. Yeah, and that's why the index view for this polls app is just an empty string, because it just means like whatever, put it polls / with nothing after it.
Interesting. So this is saying here, that's actually what it looks like. It's calling. So it's sending the HTTP request object as the request, and then question ID 34 to the detail function.
If you know Java, there's a framework called Spark Java, which is not the same thing as another Spark product. You have to search for Spark Java, and it uses the exact same thing.
Not to be confused with Apache Spark. That's
Right, it's not
in
Apache
Java.
Spark. They should really pick the wrong name. It's a great framework.
So I had heard this before about Django, but I didn't quite understand why you didn't have to pass the .html or .whatever. Is it just because the URL matching just automatically knows where to route it to whether or not it's gonna render an HTML page or a JSON page or?
I want to say that HTTP response, so there's a parameter that you can pass to it called the content type. So if you know HTTP, content type determines how your browser is going to interpret the output of whatever gets sent from a server. And I believe that the content type by default is HTML. So like when we were looking at our views and it said you're looking at vote 34 or whatever, that even though it wasn't actually HTML in the code itself, there's no like HTML, there's no tags in there. The type of information that it is itself, the browser is interpreting it as HTML because of the response parameters. I hope that's right.
Just wanted to see if it actually says what the content type is in here.
Response, yeah, content type text HTML. Yep.
Interesting.
So if you wanted to send down raw text, you'd say content type. I don't remember what the content type is for text. Is it just text or
Text slash
something? Whatever.
something.
Um,
Interesting.
update it.
Write views to actually do something. Each view is responsible for doing one of two things: returning an HTTP response object containing the object for the requested page, raising an exception such as HTTP 404. Rest is up to you. Your view can read records from a database or not. It can use a template such as Django's or a third-party Python template system or not. You can generate a PDF file, output XML, create a zip file on the fly, anything you want, using whatever Python libraries you want. All Django wants is that HTTP response or exception.
So I didn't see it specifying an HTTP method there. It's just defaults to get. How would you say, what if I wanted that path to be used for something?
It's part of the request object has a method attribute that you can inspect.
So I would have to handle the gets and the posts or the path all in the same.
For a function-based view, there's also something called a class-based view, which can split them out into different methods if you'd rather have them separated.
Because it's convenient, let's use Django's own database API, which we covered in tutorial 2. Here's one stab at a new index view, which displays the latest 5 poll questions in the system, separated by commas according to publication date. So we'll go to polls views. We're going to modify index. This isn't probably going to work because the publication date is going to be so old, but we'll figure it out.
Was it using the recent one or just saying,
Well, it's going to look at the publication date, which was back in August.
doesn't matter, whatever the latest 5 is.
Is it? Okay. What is that? Polls views. All right, and we want to modify index. So let's go ahead and copy this in. Let's make sure that we have the model's question. We don't. So we actually want to take all of that. All right, so we're from models importing question, which is our models file for question. We're going to be passing in to a function of index the request. We're going to do a lookup of objects order by pub date with a, what is, I know what this is, but I can't remember. That's where you're taking the last 5 of the list that's responded. You said that?
It's a slice, so it's taking from index 0 to index one less than 5.
Gotcha.
Kinda weird, so it's going to give you 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. from
Okay.
The list type object that comes back from that query.
We then create an output that's going to be split by a comma or joined by a comma in a list of question text that's in a for loop of Q in latest question list, which we get from above, and then we return that all via an output of HTTP request.
And one thing to note here, I don't know if you mentioned it, the minus in front of pub date, that's an important piece in this
yeah.
particular query because it changes the order from a normal date order goes by ascending order. So if you list the oldest one first because ascending in dates is smaller numbers. It's weird. But the minus says flip it around and give me the descending order, which gives you the dates that are at the bottom.
Interesting. Yeah, I totally glassed over that. I didn't even think to wonder what that was doing there. Interesting. So we modified that because we know, I thought we had another terminal or another tab, but interesting. Yeah, we do. Okay. Yeah, so that should have reloaded. Yeah, it did. Okay. Reloaded the thing there. Come on. Does it show that I don't know much about how to like actually interact with a Mac? There we go. Okay, so we modified the view there. It reloaded the code. We should be able to go on to the next step here. Let's see. The problem here is there's page design is hard-coded in the view. If you want to change the way the page looks, you have to edit this Python code. So let's use Django's template system to separate the design from Python by creating a template that the view can use. First, create a directory called templates in our polls directory. So we're in polls, make dir templates. Your project's template setting describes how Django will load and render templates. The default settings file configures a Django templates backend whose app dirs option is set to true. By convention, Django templates looks for a template subdirectory in each of the installed apps. We just created a templates folder in the polls directory. Django by default, or actually not by default, but when that app's dirs option is set to true, by default looks for a folder called templates. That's what that means to me. Within the templates directory you just create another directory called polls. That doesn't make too much sense because we're already in the polls directory. Why would we need to create a directory called polls inside of templates? But okay. So
What it's doing there is kind of name spacing, and this will make sense a little bit later on. Because the way that those templates, they sort of get aggregated together in a common thing. So if you have multiple applications, like let's say you didn't use a polls directory within the templates thing and you just called it index. Now another app has a templates directory and calls it index. How are you going to uniquely identify which index you care about?
I would say you could uniquely identify it because we're in the template folder of polls.
The view doesn't know that, the render function doesn't know
Okay, that's fine. I won't argue, even
It's a
though
weird one. You're
it
right. I mean, it's
seems-
strange.
Polls is your application name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you trying to figure out why you just have to place it in the polls folder? Because the reason behind I do know the reason behind the polls folder, that's the main issue, so.
Yeah, what?
Okay, if you have multiple apps, which is what Django is designed for, what it will do is it will compress all the templates folders when you create the final so what you have to do is you have to create individual app name folders inside templates, so you can have duplicate naming, so index.html. If you just place index.html inside templates and then had two apps in Django, it would just collapse the two and it would prioritize one over the other and the other would be lost. So you're just doing that to protect yourself.
Right.
So I get it. I understand that. My operations guy brain kicks in and says, that sounds like a lazy developer thing. Because the real question, or the real way I would have thought that it would have been implemented is, hey, we know that this templates folder was in the polls app. When we go to compress everything, let's just maybe take a little reverse of that and say, hey, let's take all the things that are in the template folder for polls and put it in the templates folder that's compressed in a folder called polls. I'm just saying, just make it easier for a guy like me that just doesn't quite understand why I now have to understand that my polls templates folder has a polls folder inside of it.
So a little bit of automation could be added.
Yeah.
To take care of that if you
Yeah.
just put it in.
But now if they implement that, it's gonna screw something up, they're gonna blame me for it, so.
And I think there's probably debate, even like, I don't develop my templates as Swift. I don't actually, they talk about putting a templates directory in each app.
Yeah.
Some people like that style. I am of the mindset that all of my templates belong in one templates directory. I still do the polls thing, but at that point it's sort of like here's all my templates are over here, and it's sort of like a global, just look in here. And at that point I still use I'll still have the polls directory in that one global thing, but it makes a lot more sense than for me, because at that point everything from under that templates directory is going to look like a template.
Is it just a bad name? Because, I mean, the first polls, the name, that first bullet there, it really doesn't have anything to do with the actual path for the application, right? It's just the name. Your path is defined somewhere in code, and that's just what you're calling the application.
That's not true in this
It's not
case,
true.
because what you were referring to, I think, is the URL stuff where we could change the name. That part is meant to be configurable.
Yeah.
This part is like, this is a Python package.
Oh, okay.
This is not changing. It's got a init.py in it. It has all the structure that makes it a Python package.
Okay.
So that little bit's not going to change.
I promise we'll move on. I'm looking at this, and it literally is saying exactly what the fine individual back there and you were saying, was that you have to do this because it's going to condense it down, and Django will make a horrible idea and choose the first template it finds whose name matches. I didn't ad-lib that. On my screen it says horrible idea here, you just can't see it. But that's fine. Okay, so we're going to create inside the polls app template folder polls an index.html file.
And I hope where this will become clear is that there's a render function that you're going to be using here in a moment. And the render function is not application aware. It doesn't know where you are when you're calling the render function. So it can't, it's not written in a way that's magical enough to deduce, oh, I'm already in the polls app, let me look for stuff that is in just this polls templates directory.
Lazy. Excuse me. Put the following code in the template. All right, so it looks like we're using the, is this Jinja template? Or is this
Django template?
This is Django template, okay. So this is just a Django template format, language, I guess, kind of how it's actually got if statements, for loops, some other high-speed things. We're gonna put that.
Actually, it looks like
They are. They're pretty similar. And one of the changes that happened in Django 1.8 or 1.9 was you can actually use Jinja as an alternative template system. They made it configurable. But again, their mantra of having everything out of the box is they give you a template language without you having to go and install one.
This looks pretty easy to understand. So we know from our previous view that we're gonna have a variable thing called latest question list. So it's going to do an if latest question list. It's then going to, and I assume that's a UL HTML tag, then does a for loop of question in latest question list, and it then generates HTML in a automated fashion of creating a link to /polls/ the question.id, and then also question.text. Then it ends the for loop, adds another UL if there's a, so if the latest question list doesn't exist, it goes to else, says no polls are available, and then it ends the if statement. That's pretty straightforward there. Now let's update our index view in polls views.py to use the template. So we're going to have to update the views.py. We need to add Django template import loader. Not Kurt Loader. Did I just date myself? Anybody remember Kurt Loader? For the record, YouTube, 0 people raised their hand. That's fine. So yeah, we're going to update the index function here. And we're going to add in, so we're just modifying this a little bit. We're going to add in a context. Actually, no, first so the change here is we're going to call in the template, and we're going to use that loader import to get the template of polls/index. It finally clicks because, as he said, everything's condensed. It needs to be in that polls directory so that index.html isn't picked up. If we only had a single template and it was index.html, we wouldn't need that polls, and we could just take everything off of that and it'd be index.html. But if we had 2, Django would be stupid and do the wrong thing. But that makes sense now. I get it. Pass in a context that the latest questions list, which passes into the template. We're passing in that variable above of latest question list, and we call HTTP response. We do a template.render of context and request. That's all pretty self-explanatory to me. Let's delete the older one. Write that. Okay. That code loads the template called polls/index.html and passes it a context. The context is a dictionary mapping template variable names to Python objects. Load the page by pointing your browser at /polls. Let's do that. Well, I'll be. That's the last 5 polls. That's generated by our template that we just wrote, and it's also links to all the other questions. That makes perfect sense. That's pretty cool. Awesome. Any questions?
So the context has my question ID variable and the question underscore ID. I saw question.id in the code you just wrote. And so I'm trying to figure out how that eventually becomes the view. View.
That was under, yeah. So let's see, question ID. Okay, so yeah. So what here, that this link that it's generating is that link there at the bottom, but the question text that it's pulling from the latest question list is what's new.
So it inserts that string into a URL thing, which I guess is perfect.
So it's doing, it does 2 things. Yeah, the URL it's making is saying all of our URLs live at polls/ this number, and then the text that it's inserting on the other half of the link tag or or the inside body of the link tag is the actual question text.
Since your text is all the same, if you went into your template.
I was
you
just
might
about
put
to
your
bring that
ID
up.
over to the right or something.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do this first. Let's go
Or
ahead.
Change.
Let's do this.
Picked 101 was
Select.
one of them.
Let's undo. Let's delete all of them except 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can delete selected. Yes, I'm sure. I know I'm going off script. I just wanted to get rid of those questions that we created. Actually, let's delete one more.
Well, actually, leave one more until you see which one's there.
Do what? So
What
we.
was saying, leave a sixth question in there.
Well, no. So we're going to show the 5, but now we'll see a bunch of what's new and then a what's up in this when we refresh.
I mean,
Go ahead.
Perfect. That's pretty awesome. I do like that admin page. It's very useful. Let's see. A shortcut, render. It's a very common idiom to load a template, fill a context, and return an HTTP response? Or would it be return a HTTP response?
H is a vowel sound, so it's technically an.
H is a vowel sound?
H.
I think you're returning an object.
I mean,
but
it's
it
not a
happens to
vowel,
be
it's a vowel
an
sound.
HTTP
When you say H,
object.
you're saying A.
And
And H.
the one that I have a problem with is unicorn. It's not an unicorn, it's a unicorn. It sounds.
Well,
Hurts it now.
but it's not an unicorn, it's a unicorn, because
Yeah,
you,
but
you is not a vowel sound.
I know, but I see it written.
Oh,
I read a lot of
okay,
unicorn
okay.
literature.
English is hard, that's all I know.
30 minutes later. Let's see. An HTTP response object with the result of the render template. Django provides a shortcut. Here's the full index view rewritten. What are we even looking at? Oh, okay. So in this case, we're actually, let's go ahead and compare this to the previous index. Well, actually, we need a whole slew of things.
I think I asked you this before, and you said yes, but you can run this in a microservices framework, right? And what was there was some tool to do it with,
If you want to run serverless,
Yeah.
you run it, you can use a tool called Zappa. But it's not Django specific, it's any Python web application. But
Okay, so in this previous index, we were loading a template as a template variable. In this case, we're using render, and render takes the request, takes the location of the template, and the context. That makes sense. I'm not being facetious when I say that makes sense. Like, it actually makes sense to me.
I think it's a good way to show like what is render doing. It's not magic. It's loading a template and calling render on it and passing it through an
Is it-
HTTP response.
Is it any faster doing it via render versus template?
I mean, technically, it's probably a tiny bit faster to do it all inline because Python function calls have an overhead to them. So you're getting the overhead of calling one render method, but that is way over optimizing for the problem. Because that's in 99% of the cases or more, that's not where your bottleneck's going to be. It's going to be somewhere in your database. So don't try and think of that as I'll make my code faster by loading templates and then calling render at every function.
Smash a
Some
function
developer's
down.
going to hate you in the future for doing that.
Is it more Pythonic to do it this way?
I would say it's more Pythonic to offer like a simpler, cleaner interface. Yeah, so using render would be a more Pythonic way to go. And I think just generally, like not just Python, but as a software principle, if you have a nice interface that wraps up and provides a clean facade around a few things that you have to load, I think we'd all agree that that would be preferable.
one simple line is better than 5 simple lines.
Right,
I mean,
right.
If that one line gets ultra complex, then maybe not me, but
Yeah.
that's a pretty simple line.
And they note that it's for a common pattern of you're trying to get HTML to the browser, so we're gonna just do all the things that you need to do that. If you're streaming stuff or if you're doing PDFs or something else, you're gonna have to do something different than just straight up render. But at that point, you already know that you're doing something special that is gonna require something different.
Note that once we've done all of this and all the views, we no longer need to import loader and HTTP response. You want to keep HTTP response. If you still have the sub methods for detail and results and vote. Raising a 404 error, the best part. I'm excited. This is errors. I cause a lot of errors every time I do stuff. Like I like errors. It means stuff's actually working. I think errors are better than it actually working because you know that it's actually working when an error is raised. Just saying. It's my view. It may not be yours.
So says the opposite.
When I love logs. I don't understand devs who don't like to put logs in their stuff. I've been with a few teams where I'm like, can we get a log statement here? And they're like, no. And I'm like, why not? This is the part that's broken. Can we log why it's broken? No, we'll just figure it out when it breaks. I'm like, "Argh." It's fine. I'm not that upset about it. All right, so looks like let's tackle the question detail view, the page that displays the question text for a given poll. What did I just say? Raising a 404 error. Now let's tackle the question detail view. The page that displays the question text for a given poll. Here's the view. Okay. So we're going to go to views.py again. We're going to import a new HTTP section of HTTP 404. So, oh yeah, we don't need HTTP response. Oh no, I guess we do need HTTP response because we still have the other details there. That's what it was saying in that last statement, was if I went through and rendered each of those, that actually...
But you don't need the loader now. Do you use the loader anymore? I think
No.
the loader's gone.
We can get rid of the loader, but let's just go ahead and add HTTP 404 on here. All right, and then under detail, let's go ahead and add all that. So this is now doing a try, creating a question variable that's taking in the question objects get with a primary key equals question ID, doesn't accept for question does not exist, and it raises a HTTP 404 with a message of question does not exist. Otherwise, it returns a render request of polls detail.html with a context of question. I suspect we're going to have to create a template called detail HTML. Who wants to make a bet? Again, zero participation from the group. I'm just up here by myself, YouTube. There's not 22 people in the room. Biggest turnout I've ever had. New concept here. This view raises the HTTP 404 exception if a question with the requested ID does not exist. We'll discuss what you could put in that polls detail HTML template a bit later, so freaking tutorial just made an ass out of me. But we'll quickly get an example. So we're just, yeah, okay, we are creating a detail.html. It's just going to put in question. So that's cool. And that's in the template folder of polls, detail HTML question. Great, right? You will get, well, oh, okay, we'll get you started now. Okay, so we now should be able to go to polls. Let's go ahead and open this one, and then let's do one that shouldn't exist. No, that didn't work. What am I missing here?
That's the 404, that's right.
Oh, it is? Oh, interesting.
So you're in the debug mode, which
How-
gives you extra information. So if you had debug off, it would have shown that question does not exist text.
Okay. Well then, so now I kind of feel,
Below it.
I
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
feel
there-
dumb.
sorry. Yeah.
What would have this shown, what would have this shown before this?
It would have, because you weren't doing a lookup before, so.
This is getting up page 404 too. But I guess this wouldn't show up in if debug mode was off, would it?
Right.
So is debug mode enabled with the run server or?
It's in the
Debug
settings
mode
pod.
is enabled at the settings level. So regardless of which server you run it on, it's controlled by your setting. And you should
That
never
sentence question
put
does
debug
not
on
exist.
for a production.
Was that part
Yeah, I don't have
of
it
your?
turned off, I know.
That was in,
It's a Boolean in the settings file. There's a file called settings.py.
Yeah.
And it's debug equal true.
So-
right
So
now.
if you put some other text in there, then you'll see it change.
right.
You can,
Let's answer high-speed individual number one's question here by going to settings. There it is right there.
That's good. I don't know what that's gonna do.
Or does it pick it up automatically?
Yeah, it picked it up.
I would assume it would default to.
Oh, it failed.
You must set.
Oh, allow.
Once you want true or false, you can't just comment out.
No, well, it's complaining about something else. When you switch into a non-debug mode,
We have to
for your
specify loud
security,
hosts.
to protect you at a security level, you have to specify a minimum number of other things. Allowed hosts is one of them.
All right. So never mind. I won't show you what that does. You just get the cool debug page. All right. I'm happy to keep going, or if people have questions, tell me. We don't have to, I'm sure we don't want to be here all day listening to me ramble on, but I could totally do it for like the next 6 hours, so. Let's see, a shortcut. It's a very common idiom to use get and raise a HTTP 404 if the object doesn't exist. Django, surprisingly, provides a shortcut. Here's the detail view rewritten. So we're going to, we don't need to import, oh yeah, we do. So we're going to get object or 404, which we go over here. We're going to do this one here. And we're going to modify the detail section here. Interesting. So, okay, so I'm guessing this render now. Or I get, okay, so this get object or 404 is doing the try except here that we had above, right? I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
kind of internal to that.
Yeah, okay. And so then it's going to either have the rendered HTTP 404 question does not exist, or 404. I bet when it 404s, it's not going to say question does not exist. It's going to have a different response.
I think it's something generic.
Yeah.
Although I guess we can look at it.
Yeah.
It'll show up, yeah.
No questions matches for the given query. Interesting. Okay, cool. So yeah, that was the okay, that probably explains it right here. The get object or 404 function takes a Django model as its first argument and an arbitrary number of keyword arguments, which it passes to the get function of the model's manager. It raises 404 if the object does not exist. Surprise, surprise. All right. Use of the template system. Back to the detail view of our poll application. Given the context variable question, here's what the polls detail template might look like. So we're going to update.
Before you move on to that,
Yep.
Go back to the, where you just added the get full employee tab.
Yep.
In the code, or on the page, or on the tutorial page, you can see the code again.
Sure.
So, the text that showed up when we got that on the webpage was, had the word question and capitalized question. Where did that string question come from?
That comes from, if I remember correctly.
Question was in the query?
No, so if I remember correctly, all that's built by the model itself, right? So the model, the model's smart and knows that there's so the actual model itself is called question.
Okay.
And that's where it's smart. And I think we even go a step further if we have this in here. So it's even smart enough to know that since the class is called question, all of the questions in the polls section of the Django admin are called questions. I learned that from you last time. See, I remember things.
Which is configurable, so if you have something that doesn't pluralize by just adding an S to it, you can actually set the proper name. So if you're very specific about your English and getting it right, you can do that.
Sheep in your query.
Sheeps. If you have a couple of gooses, that's fine. Is it crows? Like a flock of crow? They still, oh, that's right, a murder of crow is plural.
List murder. up
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, that'd be good. Why, now hold on. Why doesn't Django automatically do that? It should, if I put in a model of crow, it should automatically rename them in the admin page as murder.
It's not too much to ask, is it?
Nope.
Lazy developers again.
Lazy developers.
So, one more question, wasn't that, the previous Python, file, I believe was the views?
Yep, views, not that. Yep.
The third line or the second, the from, why is it dot models, the from dot models import question? This is
That was
always
the
that basic Python, but and how the
Okay, Patrick.
projects are.
Yep. I'll let him.
Somebody explain that to me, because I couldn't explain it to my intern.
It's an explicit relative path.
Okay.
It's a way to do a module import that is relative to your current file location. So you think about interacting with your shell. If you are a shell person, have enough experience to do that. Dot means the current directory.
Right.
So they have an explicit relative syntax to say, I'm currently in the views file. I have a peer essentially at the models at the same directory level to say dot models. So you can do it that way, rather than saying polls dot
My
models.
application flows.
Yeah, my app dot polls dot models. That's another way to go. It's a preferential thing. There are arguments for and against doing it. The for argument essentially boils down to what if you want to rename your package and it's no longer polls and now it's
You gotta change. all the
doodads,
files.
and you gotta go and modify all your imports. A different camp of people says that how often does that kind of thing happen? And, being explicit is gonna be very clear of where this is coming from. So that's what it is. You can also do, it works with dot, but you can go up a package directory, so you can do dot, whatever is above it, and kind of navigate around that way. It gets a little scary depending on how high you go. But you have a slash in there or something like that. You can't do slash. It doesn't-
So that's my peeve. Why can't you just make it simple?
Because that's part of this grammar of the language. I don't know. I don't know.
But there's no slash, you just added the slash, right?
No, apparently we can't do slashes in Python.
Go talk to the Python core dev team. Put up a pet, man. Like, debate that one. I'm sure they didn't debate that at all.
It's all Guido's fault. It's all Guido's fault. That's fine. All right. Maybe, do we want to maybe end after the use of the template system, or do we want to keep going? It's up to you guys.
I'm curious, like, how much is left. Maybe we can pause for a moment and, like, zoom out and see what part of the tutorials have we not covered. Because I think what you've shown is sort of the core of Django. Working with models, making views to show off data from those models, wiring everything up, having an admin. That's the kernel of it. There's a lot of other cool other stuff that we could get into, I'm sure, but I don't know how much. Like, is there I can't remember, is there a tutorial index or or table of contents or something? So we know what's ahead.
So we got all the way to part 3, use of the template system. Part 4 of
Okay.
writing a simple form.
Testing.
Part 5, that's automated testing should be a whole one by itself.
We'll do another talk on automated
Yeah.
testing next year.
Do we want to take a look at the form?
Can you go down a little bit more? Just
Sure.
what's after testing?
Test a view, customize your app's look and feel, adding a background image.
So we're starting to get to the lower level
Yeah.
stuff here. I'm just wondering if there's any of those topics that we should like hit before we stop.
What is the again, the non-existent 22 people in the room that haven't raised their hand at all think?
I can't stay too long, so
It's all good.
I gotta leave around 8:30, make sure or something.
All right.
I don't know about
The only other piece that might be worth going over is the forms element. So like, if you think about building a website, you want the viewing side of things. You want to be able to like have people issue HTTP GET requests to display HTML in the browser. You guys have seen the core of that. You know, with the template system, you just have to put HTML in there. If you don't know that, that's a different subject to learn, but that's it. The other half of that, if you want to put information back in, doing an HTTP post, like sending data to the server, that's where Django forms come into play and give you patterns to interact with users in that way, doing, you know, simple HTML forms and error messages and how dealing with that sort of stuff. So I think that's the next piece of the tutorial, because I think what they are trying to show with the tutorial is closing the loop of like we're actually going to end up voting in that final view, and that's probably where they're going to put the form. So that's kind of what's left. So if you guys think that's worth going over, then let's do it. And
We could also do it next time, or whatever.
poll the audience. Worth going over
It's a
forms.
pretty good introductions. I think I've got enough that I can pull this before I look myself. Really understand it.
Works for me.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thanks. This was,
Yeah, maybe one can ask questions if it's.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we said, we'll hang out.
Sort of like Piazza, there's some platform to asking questions, like task questions.
Very good.
thanks for coming out. This
Thanks,
is
guys.
fun. I thoroughly enjoy being the ops guy trying to learn how to do web development. It's a good time. I truthfully learn every time we've done this so far. I'll full disclosure, in my personal time, I took everything that I was learning here, and for the VFW, I started putting together a Django app that's not publicly posted. It's actually just running on my local computer. That's actually taking in data. So the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, the actual national provides us a list of our members, and the list is incredibly dirty data. Like it's all jacked up information. Like it has my name spelt wrong, and I'm one of the second in command of the VFW, and I tell them, hey, it's Pierson. Like 6 months later, I'll look again, and it's still spelled Pearson. And so, and I've told them multiple times. And so I started using Django to take that list in, because that's what we have to consider the master list. And so I ingest that data into this Django app. I then take all of the corrections and apply it to that list, and then some other information. And I was actually able to create a visualization that showed basically where all of our members were located. And it provided me information that I could then take to the membership voting committee to say, look, we have 952 members in the VFW. 40% of them are outside of the Frederick area. Our post is serving the Frederick area, so these 40 members are members that are not, that they don't necessarily have to be members of our post. We can help them find a new post to be more interactive with. So I was able to use, what I'm getting at is I was able to use Django based off of the stuff that I was learning here to put together a piece of information that I was able to use as actionable information for the organization I was involved with. And it was like 3 days worth of work, and it was super simple,
Cool.
super cool stuff.
Sounds like a success.
Yeah,
Well,
very
thanks
cool.
for going through this. This is really fun to get someone who, not super familiar with Django to
Yeah.
explore all this, so appreciate
Yeah,
it.
yeah, thanks. Appreciate everybody coming out, it's fun.